Welcome to this special edition of SportsBeat KC, the sports podcast of the Kansas City Star and KCUR. It's Wednesday, March 4th, and I'm Blair Kirchhoff. The Chiefs have made a major move, trading cornerback Trent McDuffie to the Los Angeles Rams for draft picks, and we're here to talk about it. Star columnist Sam McDowell and Vahe Gregorian, plus beat writer Pete Sweeney, will break down one of the first big deals of the NFL season. Guys, let's get right into it. First impressions from each of you. Pete, let's start with you. What'd you think?
I think coming out of the combine last week, when Sam and I were there, it felt like this was inevitable. I mean, I just think there was a feel with the team that they would have ideally wanted to get a long-term thing done, but I felt like that was going to be difficult just because this is a fifth-year option and there's going to be other teams interested and you need more draft picks. And so I was leaning that they would trade him more so than finding a way to keep him. And I think if you're a Chiefs fan, at least in my opinion, you got to be pleasantly surprised at the haul that you got back. I had my doubts, and I would write this in articles, and I won't shy away. I had doubts about them getting a first rounder this year. So kudos to them, not only for getting that, but also adding a 5 and a 6, a third next year. It feels very reminiscent to me of the Tyreek Hill deal from a couple of years back. And now the key becomes, just like that draft where you had a lot of picks, you got to have as good of a draft this year, right? I mean, you're trading Trent McDuffie. The deal is only going to look as good as what the picks end up being for you, what you do now. And so I think that's a big part of it. But I think if you're a Chiefs fan and you're trying to retool this thing in 1 year and build for the future, you should be pretty pleased with what you got for Trent McDuffie.
Sam, I was kind of greedy. I wanted, the Rams they've got 2 picks in the first round, right? 13 and 29. I would love to have had 13, but to get a first round pick, a couple of seconds, or not seconds, but 2 more in this year's draft and a third round next year, I think that's a pretty fair return for Trent McDuffie.
Yeah, I mean, this is really how ideal business works in the NFL. I mean, and when I say deal, I think, first of all, it's a salary cap league, which to me is like this league-wide beautiful thing, but for teams, it becomes the enemy at some point. And the salary cap became the enemy to the Chiefs, to where, I mean, there's reports out there that Trent McDuffie is going to make more than $30 million. Like, you can't force that into your salary cap if you're the Chiefs. And so when I say ideal, it's because you pick Trent McDuffie 21st overall, you got 2 Super Bowls and another Super Bowl appearance out of him. And now the equivalent of this return is the 20th overall pick. That's dependent on where the Rams end up picking next year. But basically, at worst, it's the equivalent is going to be the 21st overall pick, which is exactly where you took Trent McDuffie. You're going to be paying significantly less, probably, what is it, $4.5 million for that pick rather than 30. Like, this is how you remain relevant and not go through these short windows like the Rams are trying to do right now. And look, I had sources tell me that this came down to the Rams and Giants, because I think one thing people have to keep in mind when you talk about a player being available is the whole league could see value out of Trent McDuffie. But who does he make sense for? And to me, that requires a few things. I mean, it requires, you've got to have the cap space to acquire Trent McDuffie. You've got to be ready to win now as opposed to later. And there's only so many teams that are willing to do that and have the means to do that. And it came down to the Rams and Giants, like I said, and the Chiefs held out for more than just that 29th overall pick and end up with a real haul of picks for a player who I think is terrific. I think he's the best slot cornerback in the game and a really good outside cornerback. And I don't know that the entire league, for example, I could see some other GMs in the league saying, wow, that's a lot for Trent McDuffie.
He's also, Vahe, quite a locker room presence. And we were talking earlier about just kind of where his locker is located in the Chiefs locker room. It expresses what the Chiefs think of him and what he means to the Chiefs. He's in a kind of a primary position in the locker room. So what are the Chiefs losing with Trent McDuffie?
Well, they as Pete and Sam really laid out well. I mean, the on-field aspect is huge, but it's no small thing. The sort of what might be called the locker room intangible. And, part of what they've been able to do over the years has been to have those kind of, for lack of a better term, glue guys or guys that make a difference around them. But on balance, you can't come away from this not thinking first of the haul. I mean, I do think it's a real haul. I don't think I think it's a dimension beyond what I would have expected. And I think it is interesting. Sam used the term, a salary cap league, and Pete referred to the Tyreek Hill trade. One of the things that these circumstances kind of dictated was with no room to really maneuver for the Chiefs, they were sort of, the circumstances made them trade these guys at the peak of their value. And I think that's part of the churn, right? That kind of has to happen now, especially the Chiefs have multiple things to replenish. You hate to see him go. It'll be a void, and I know we'll talk more about what those implications are. But I think this is a winning move by the Chiefs.
Pete, what do the Chiefs have left in the secondary?
Yeah, that is to me somewhat concerning because Jalen Watson is currently a free agent, and now you're looking at really Noel Williams and Christian Fulton as being your guys. And I think when the Chiefs signed Fulton last year, everyone had high hopes that he would be the cornerback opposite Trent in what would be the base, and just really could never seemingly get healthy. And now you're going to be relying on him for the NFL draft to be that guy for you. And so I think it's fine. I think now quite instantly cornerback does become a very real need. You do have other names like Chris Roland Wallace and Kevin Knowles, but again, suddenly becomes thinner than it was before. And so as we're looking at draft needs, probably more for the number 29 pick and beyond. By the way, now they're projected to pick 9 times, which they really needed. So now the second through the 9th pick that you make, you got to imagine that 1 or 2 of them will be a cornerback to add to that room. And who knows if they're players next week in free agency for another cornerback that makes sense.
Yeah, Sam, this sort of changes the mock draft game a little bit, doesn't it? We're going to start looking at players in the late 20s as well as the top 10 guys.
Yeah, I mean, that's the real takeaway is our job just got harder. I mean, we can't just this should have been the one year the draft was easier for us, was just looking at the top 9 picks, but sure enough, the Chiefs are going to be picking at 10:30 or 11 o'clock at night. In all seriousness, I do think one of the probably thing that will go under the radar here is they won't necessarily pick 29th. This, I think, when you look at the additional return beyond the 29th pick, I view that as the assets to move back up to that 20 to 21 range to where they got a Trent McDuffie. I mean, if you're at 29 and you see a player you like at 20 to 21, I think the type of package it would require is that extra 3rd round pick, maybe. Maybe you do have to throw in the 5th or the 6th, which is why I think it's really important to say the value of this pick, this haul in totality, is about 20th. It could move up to 18th, 19th range if the Rams end up, if Stafford gets hurt and they end up picking 9th overall next year, something that 3rd round pick next year becomes a lot more valuable, which is why I was a little surprised that the Rams were willing to part with next year's 3rd as opposed to this year's 3rd, because they know this year's 3rd is at the end of the draft, right? They know it's the 29th pick. You don't have that guarantee. There's not much room for that pick to become worse a year from now as opposed to it becoming better. But yeah, I mean, the last time the Chiefs were here was, of course, the reason that they're here now, again, with Trent McDuffie. And sorry to drone on, but I think that's one more important piece of the picks being split is one of the reasons they're in a really tough spot is all these guys came up in the same year. Trent McDuffie, Jalen Watson, Brian Cook, Leo Chenal. Like when you nail the draft and you've got a ton of guys in the draft, they all come up the same year. I think it's an advantage that they've got a little bit of extra resources now and a little bit of extra resources a year from now to maybe break up that wave.
That's a good point. And of course, George Karlaftis was part of that draft, and they signed him before last season, extended him last season. So Vahe, it's I guess another to the list, right, of cornerbacks who are rise to the level of Pro Bowl or All Pro caliber for the Chiefs under Andy Reid that doesn't get a second gets moved on, right? Marcus Peters and Charvarius Ward, L'Jarius Sneed, and now Trent McDuffie.
Yeah, it's true. And I think we can say that in each case, they've basically successfully replenished themselves. There's been gaps, there's been voids, but I suppose one of the reasons they've been willing to do that is that they think they can get at least similar value, at least similar quality, by resetting and going back into the till, basically. And it seems to be a position where the whole defensive backfield, in a lot of ways, seems to be a part of the field where the Chiefs, I used that word earlier, churn, but I do think that there's something to that they see they can keep that working and supplement financially other places where they can through this. I mean, it's not an entirely 100% way they do it, but it is interesting. I can't think of another position where they've done it that way more. You guys might correct me on that, but it just seems like in that aspect of the game, they're confident they can reset and redevelop, and it's in short bursts, as it turns out.
Yeah, and it's a good spot to take advantage of your strengths. You're really good at drafting cornerbacks. You're good at developing cornerbacks. You drafted Snead in the 4th round. You got Charvarius Ward as an undrafted free agent who got paid. You got Jalen Watson in the 7th round who's going to get paid. And you've got Noah Williams in the 3rd round who looks like he can start next year. So, yeah, it's never a bad idea to take advantage of your strengths.
I just wanted to add a quick point to Sam's, which was a great scoop that the Giants were involved here. There may be more communication between the Giants and Chiefs now that Matt Nagy is involved. And they floated out Kayvon Thibodeau. And we know how much this regime has liked a former 1st-round pick. Not to say that anything would necessarily happen there, but that type of player along the defensive line is needed for KC. Comes right now with the 14.75 cap number for 26. Presumably they could maybe come up with a short-term deal to lessen that if they did make a move like that. But I just think everything should be on the radar, especially now with these teams that have obvious connections to the Chiefs. New York's now involved in that. Tennessee, Chicago, for example. Like, I'm sure all these old friends are consistently having communication as we lead up to the free agency and the draft.
Okay, great conversation, guys. Thanks to our SportsBeat KC staff of Gabriella Lacey, Suzanne Hogan, and Urban Zhang, and our editors Jeff Rosen and Scott Chasen. Hey, check out our regular podcast that dropped on Tuesday featuring Sam McDowell and Pete Sweeney in their impressions from the NFL Combine. And we also had a fun conversation with a Dutch soccer fan who used to live in Kansas City. He lets us know what to expect from fans from the Netherlands who will invade Kansas City this summer for the World Cup. We'll be back soon with another SportsBeat KC, where we talk sports in Kansas City.